Welcome to Lair the Alchemist and another edition of Sabbath Sunday, where we get together and we talk Black Sabbath. I have my regular co-host here with me, Darren. He's been at the Lair a bunch of times, and for the first time here on Sabbath Sunday, he's been at the Lair before. We have John McEntee. He's joining us from the road here. His band Incantation is out on tour. And he's joined us today to talk about we're going to just kind of talk about some latest Black Sabbath news. So guys, thank you for joining me here at the Lair.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, what we're talking about today is the recent, I guess it hasn't been officially announced. Tony Martin, former Black Sabbath singer, came out and said that he had been in communication with Sabbath management or with Tony Iommi, and there is going to be a release. They're going to re-release the Tony Martin the four Tony Martin era Black Sabbath albums. Eternal Idol has already been reissued. Now, for those who may not know, because I do get this question a lot, why hasn't the Tony Martin era albums been reissued? We're talking about Headless Cross, Tear, Cross Purposes, and Forbidden. And the reason why they haven't been reissued and the other albums have is because the other albums were in the States on Warner Brothers Records. And those other Tony Martin albums were on IRS. And IRS was a record label that folded, I think, in '96. And just recently, within the last year or so, Iommi has gotten the rights to those albums back. So Black Sabbath could not release those records unless IRS released them. IRS is defunct, and they had to wait, I guess, to get the rights to those records back. So he's finally gotten them back. Tony Martin has said that there's going to be a box set containing all the Tony Martin albums. No official release date, although he said sometime in 2022. So what do you guys think of this, John? What do you think about finally these Tony Martin albums getting re-released?
I mean, I think it's great. I love the Tony Martin era of Black Sabbath. So, I mean, it's great. And it's nice to know that over time, people have really started to appreciate his contribution to Black Sabbath, because I think he was in a pickle of a situation for sure, being in that band. I mean, having all these great vocalists before him, and then also having the tide turning with music in general at the time that he was out too, where people either wanted actually probably heavier stuff or even the more alternative type stuff or something like that. But I think it's great that it's finally out. I mean, I wish that it was individual albums and box sets, and to hear a lot of maybe some cool outtakes or some live shows from those time periods. I mean, I have a lot of bootlegs I downloaded from like the internet and stuff of live shows from, the Tony Martin era. And it'd be great to have some of those, included on, especially if you can get one from each album or something where you could hear some of those songs live, because I think he does a great job. I mean, I think he's extremely underrated. I mean, he does a great job, doing the Ozzy stuff and doing the Dio stuff. I mean, he's not either one of them, but he's very versatile as a singer. He's, I'm a super huge Tony Martin fan. I mean, I didn't like it at the time when it came out. I couldn't grasp my head around it, but I grew into it probably, I don't know, about 20 years ago. I started like really listening to those albums and appreciating it. And since then, it's like, I don't know, it's hard to say. When I hear Tony Martin Black Sabbath, I just love it. I mean, of course, Eternal Idol is not one of the albums, but I love Eternal Idol. I think that's an amazing one. But I mean, really his first three are my favorite. I think, I'm not a fan of Forbidden too much. I never really gave that one too much of that's the least of the ones, I guess, that I gave a chance to. And what was the other one? The other one was Cross Purposes. Cross Purposes is good, but for me, out of the three, it's a little bit more alternative sounding of an album than the other ones. It just gives me that alternative vibe. I don't know if it was on purpose, I think some of the songs are good. It just for the Tony Martin era, I think that's probably my least favorite one. But anyway, I think it's great that they're doing it. I just wish it wasn't in one box set, 'cause I think we'll be missing a lot from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of strange that Black Sabbath didn't have the rights to that music. I mean, a band of their stature couldn't negotiate a contract that they would retain the rights, especially in the event of the label going defunct. I mean, I would think that if the label ceases to exist, then, you know, the rights go back to the artist, because there's nobody to.
Normally it does.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, is that what they put out in a statement? Was that the reason? Because
that's what I've heard Iommi say, that we've gotten the rights back to this music, and that's what's held out on it. Now, even though IRS went defunct, I was reading the Wikipedia entry, it was sort of resurrected at one point, but it was, the name was changed. It fell under the Universal Music Group blanket, and so who knows with the legal entanglements that go on with these types of things, but they may have just signed, you know, whatever type of contract that they signed didn't give them the rights. Because I can't believe that if Iommi could have, they would have done something with them. I mean, it may not have been a box set, but they would have at least, you know, reissued them at some point. I mean, those albums, they got one issue on CD, I think, and that was it. I don't think there's ever been any kind of
not that I'm aware of.
I'm guessing that it's just was caught in some legal web.
Yeah, because he even stated something about people appreciating those albums a lot more now than when they came out and stuff. So, you know, you figure if he could, he would want to release it earlier, you know, why not?
I would think that you would want as much material out as possible, because I mean, even if that's not the most popular era of your band, there's still an audience for. I mean, the albums did sell. You know, Headless Cross and that album, there's a lot of people that really love Headless Cross, and
great album.
You know, it's flawed. Material is about 50% what I would consider to be Sabbath. The rest of it would be something similar, more similar to Whitesnake. But it's a popular album, and it's definitely one that I would think that from Tony Iommi's perspective, he would want to keep in print. I mean, there's always going to be somebody that's going to want the entire Black Sabbath catalog. It's always good to have that stuff out there. But I mean, if his hands were tied and it was caught up in a legal situation, well then, you know, you don't really have much choice in the matter. But as far as the Tony Martin era, yeah, I mean, like you said, John, I didn't embrace it completely. It seemed a little antiseptic to me. It seemed like it was really kind of safe sounding. And when we get into Headless Cross, the production, man, I mean, really slick. Cozy Powell is drumming on it, but really it could have just as easily been a drum machine the way that it sounds. Some of the everybody's quiet.
I love the album.
I'm gonna go off on my.
I know what you're saying, but I love the album.
But I don't have the album right in front of me. But Devil and Daughter.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, the subject matter consistently, lyrically, is of a dark nature. But the album itself, the music itself, has kind of a lighter sound. It's also sort of, it's that slick 80s production. I think that kind of kills the dark vibe. I mean, by contrast, if you're talking about the darkest Sabbath album, you're talking about two of the darkest Sabbath albums, in my opinion, would be Mob Rules and Born Again. And you put those two albums up against Headless Cross or Tear, I mean, it's like night and day. So I think what kind of turned me off a little bit, and I still liked them, but I think what kind of soured me a little bit to that era initially was that it didn't have that dark vibe. I thought that Tony's guitar tone was kind of neutered a little bit. It wasn't like classic, thick, rich Iommi tone. There's more of that in Eternal Idol than there is in Headless Cross. It comes back a little bit in Tear, but there's a lot of keyboards in Tear. You'd said, John, that you thought Cross Purposes had kind of an alternative sound to it. I could see that, but I could really hear Tony's tone coming back into that one. Psychophobia, Immaculate Deception. There was more of an Iommi presence on those. Maybe the song structures themselves might have been a little bit more contemporary sounding, but I think the classic Iommi tone. Plus, we had Geezer. Geezer was back in the band. You know, that made a big difference. I saw them on that tour. I thought they were really, really great. But I think generally where the Tony Martin era, those albums didn't really set the world on fire. I think there's been a renewed interest in those, and I think it's a good time. I think maybe it worked out for the best that they couldn't have been released earlier, because now I think people are definitely ready for them, and I think it'll be pretty successful. Might even be more successful than the latest reissues of Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, because Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules have been released so many times. There's so many different versions out there. This is now, unless you get these CDs used, you can't even hear these albums on like streaming. Amazon Music doesn't play them, Spotify doesn't play them. I mean, they're rare. So I think it's actually a pretty lucrative thing for Tony to do, is to release these now. I think people are pretty excited about it now more than ever.
I do hope I do hope that, and John, you had mentioned this, I think, about, you know, putting it inside a box. I hope that they release them separately also, because being inside a box may cause some people to hesitate. If you're somebody who's unfamiliar with that era, and like you just mentioned, Darren, none of this stuff is even on streaming. So, you know, the casual person, unless they search it out on YouTube, and if it's in a box type thing, it may turn some people off from not wanting to drop the money on that. But I'm also hoping, John, you had mentioned earlier about you were hoping that it would be separate boxes for each. I'm holding out hope that there'll at least be maybe an extra disc with bonus stuff on it, because there are some B-sides from this era. Like, what is the one? Not Black Moon, Devils. There's a B-side from the Headless Cross album. There's a B-side from, what's that?
Black Moon Rising or something like that, right?
Yeah, is that on the record though, or is that?
That's on the record.
I can't remember.
Yeah, there's something. It's like the B-side is something with that. I think Moon is in the title or something. But there's a B-side from Headless Cross. There's a B-side from Tear, and I think there's a B-side from Forbidden. I don't think there's a B-side from Cross Purposes. I could be wrong. But there's also that Cross Purposes Live CD. It was a CD VHS combo that they put out. So that could easily make for a bonus. They could put that Cross Purposes Live and maybe, I don't know if there's enough room, but squeeze those B-sides in there. It would make, so I'm hoping that we at least get, or on the individual discs, you know, maybe they'll put those B-sides, just tag them on, because all those records are, you know, roughly 40 minutes, 50 minutes long. They could easily tag on whatever miscellaneous B-sides are floating around.
I don't think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
Okay, I was just gonna say that I just don't think though, if they put it all in a box set, you could have enough, at least for like the diehard, enough interesting material in there, unless it's like remixed, or I mean, remastered's nice, but I mean, that's kind of like the poor man's remixing of an album a lot of time. And you know, I think if they just have the Cross Purposes Live, it's like, well, all the old school people found it somewhere already. All the diehards have that already. You know, I'd rather hear a live show from, you know, one of the other albums that they did, you know, something they might have recorded, or maybe some of those shows, you know, I forget, did you say Forbidden's gonna be a part of it, or?
Yeah, from what I
Okay.
understand,
They
yeah.
might have those shows where they had, what's his name? Bill Ward play drums in, was it Brazil or something like some shows, like just something added to it that's gonna be like, okay, it's nice to get the records in a box set, but you want to have something, substantially cool. Like I thought what was it? The Technical Ecstasy was great with that remix, of the album. Like something like that is like super cool for like a diehard fan. But yeah, you also want to have it simply available for, the casual fan to be able to pick up some of that stuff. I mean, just buy the CD if they want to buy it instead of buying an expensive box set. Because if you have all these Black Sabbath releases of songs you don't know with the singer you don't really know about, does the casual Black Sabbath fan want to put money down on something like that? And probably not. And another thing, going back to the release not being released sooner, I could say, without knowing anything, I could speculate and say that it might have had something to do with Black Sabbath not wanting to muddy the waters with the original Black Sabbath getting kind of back on track over all those years too. It might have been suppressed. And to say that that's far-fetching is not really, even though Sharon is not probably, scared of those albums, she probably wanted as much as possible to have the division between, the different eras of Black Sabbath and define Ozzy as, this is the main Black Sabbath and everything else is just other stuff.
Yeah, that's true. There's always been something up until now that kept Black Sabbath current, that if you were to draw from a different era and put that and release that at the same time, it would be competition. And you're right, like in and around, well, it went from Tony Martin. So Forbidden came out. Well, actually, you have to Tony Martin leaves and then comes back. So 92, Dio comes back, but Dio leaves because Sabbath had started to entertain the idea of getting back with Ozzy. And to initiate that, they were doing that one show where Sabbath was going to open the show for Ozzy and then do a couple songs. I think it was at the end they were going to have Ozzy join Sabbath on stage. Then Dio didn't want to have anything to do with that, which I don't blame him. But so that ended the resurgence of the Dio era. But then they went back with Tony Martin. But so now that probably would have been a good time. But then they have a new album with Tony Martin. And I guess the other Tony Martin albums were still in print at that time. So there really wasn't any need to remaster them or reintroduce them into the market. But then I guess when IRS folded, they were already well on their way to the reunion era. And that was like what, 98, 99?
Yeah.
So man, they didn't want to have anything to steal any of the thunder away from that, because they went all in on that.
Those albums would have sold. They would have thought people would have picked up Forbidden thinking, it's a new Sabbath album, we're just going to pick it up. And then, I mean, some people, they don't know what the hell they're doing. They just, especially if you get someone that's been out of loop for years, or like, see a
new Black Sabbath album. Yeah. And while we were talking, I looked online. So far, I've seen 3 different explanations. One, which you just said, the reunion happened. They didn't want to compete with the reunion. 2, I also read Iommi didn't have the master tapes. 3, there was some entanglement with the IRS deal and the fact that IRS didn't have a worldwide deal. There's some sort of legal entanglement with IRS. So as all things with Black Sabbath, it's murky, it's muddy. You kind of don't know exactly what's going on. But what surprises me is that, okay, John, you just mentioned so I do remember this, that Iommi got the master tapes for Forbidden a few years ago. And he said, I'm going to remix this record, remix it. And he said, but we've got these Ozzy and Dio era Black Sabbath box sets coming out. and we have to put those out first. So when Tony Martin said, oh, this Tony Martin era stuff is going to come out in 2022, I thought to myself, wait a minute, we still need a box set for Black Sabbath, for Master of Reality, for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and for Never Say Die.
They die.
Right. So unless they start putting these box sets out immediately and start doing them basically about every 2 months, when is this Tony Martin box going to come out? They're not going to put the Tony Martin box out and then 2 weeks later announce the Never Say Die box. I mean, at least I don't think they would.
Well, look at the fact that they put out the Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules remasters in and around the time they started putting out the Super Deluxe box sets. I think Volume 4 came out, and then they went and they did Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and then what was the Sabotage after that? So I mean, they're all in random order. So I don't really think that the Tony Martin, if it's going to be a box set, I don't think it's going to interfere with the release of Master of Reality or Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or Never Say Die. I think that there's no rhyme or reason to when they release things. You know, I mean, we're not following a chronology, obviously. I mean, you know, there's no first album. What was the first Super Deluxe? Was it Paranoid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then Sabotage. Oh no, Volume 4. And then Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy.
Sabotage and Technical Ecstasy.
And Technical Ecstasy, I mean, while I was thrilled to see it, I was really, really surprised. I mean, you would think that they would have put out something that was more popular, more fan friendly, like Master of Reality or Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but no. So I mean, anything goes.
Cool, hearing Technical Ecstasy with that more bass in it was pretty damn cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love the remake.
I love the album already, but it was just cool to hear it envisioned a little bit, because it actually, to me, it actually sounded a little more Sabbathy, almost like older Sabbathy, that more bass in there.
Yeah, it was a nice surprise.
That's why I'm holding out hope for a Never Say Die box with a remix.
Yeah, awesome.
I'd love to hear more bass on that record. But hey, I had my money. If you go back to some of our older videos, I was just like, oh, there's going to be one for Christmas. They're not going to pass up putting a timing wise. It made sense because they had been releasing them about every 3 months. And I thought, okay, the next one lands right at Christmas. Makes perfect business sense. They're going to put out one of the biggies like Master of Reality or the first album, and Christmas came and went without a sound. And we're sitting here in February now, and we haven't heard anything. And this is Black Sabbath. I'm starting to get a little nervous that, I mean, they won't come out and tell us they're not releasing any more of them, but I could just picture them saying, well, we did a Master of Reality double thing not that long ago. We did a first album one not that long ago. And you know what? Technical Ecstasy didn't sell as well as we thought. And we don't like Never Say Die. So we're not going to release that. And well, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, you know, maybe we'll get around to it and just leave us all hanging. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, the production costs with these things, I'm sure that's not cheap either. I mean, they got to figure, you know, if we're going to put all this money into these Super Deluxe and pay the people, like pay Steven Wilson and whoever other engineers, sound engineers they have working on this stuff. And then, I mean, it's probably quite a bit of money that goes into them. So they got to make sure that, you know, they're going to sell. Having said that,
vanity release.
Having said that, I wouldn't think that Technical Ecstasy was one I would put out there as one of the more profitable ones. Especially when, you know, they went to pretty good lengths to put that thing together. I mean, the remix, I don't think there's been a remix of any other album. So there was a remix, there was live stuff,
you
know, outtakes. I mean, it was really nice, but I mean, I'm sure it cost some money to put that thing together. But, you know.
One thing I wanted to bring up too about the Tony Martin era Black Sabbath, I think, you know, the same thing that happened with probably, I don't know about you, John, but you know, Darren was saying he kind of overlooked it at the time. It just didn't seem right in the mix of things when it came out. But I think for like, especially the deep Black Sabbath fans, after a while was just really needing something else, something else that Tony did, like Tony Iommi's doing. And I think it just opened the door up to maybe being a little more
Forgiving.
open or accepting to that stuff. And I think just over time, even, all those albums, all the classic, anything that you consider, say, classic Sabbath is how many is it? Almost 40 years old, a lot of it, so it's like, it's time that people, gave that stuff a chance. That's why so many more people are into it. But at the time, it was just like, it was too close to connecting it to what Sabbath was doing before. You were like, maybe we were talking before this episode about judging Sabbath against Sabbath is very difficult. And when you judge, if you judge some of the Sabbath stuff against Tony Martin stuff, if you judge it that way, then they're probably going to get lower ranks if you're looking at all the criteria of what made Sabbath great, say early on or midway through or whatever. But that, to me, there's a special originality about those albums that are also really good. It's just different than, what you would expect to hear from, obviously, definitely the 70s. It's probably closer to Dio stuff, but like Dio more, Sabbath Dio, I'm saying more like a cleaner version. Yeah. Like trying to go for that, trying to go for that Whitesnake money, which is what somebody in a big, somebody at the record company would say, this is the way to go, Whitesnake did it with their album, their self-titled album, Sabbath can do it with theirs, thinking that, not realizing that, the dynamic of both bands are totally different. Black Sabbath is way more of a heavy metal band than Whitesnake, ever was. And even even though the early Deep Purple stuff that, not the early, but the stuff that, David did in Deep Purple was still pretty heavy. It was still based around a more funky, rocky, bluesy thing. Even though Sabbath is bluesy, it's like blues on this, like the opposite scale of blues or whatever. It just was so I think, the production's definitely kind of hurt it. But I don't know, when I look back on those albums, if I compare them to other heavy metal albums that came out around that time, I think they hold up extremely strong, and they probably would have even done better if it probably wasn't called Black Sabbath, honestly, because, people are expecting, the Paranoid album sound. They're not expecting it to sound, songs like Devil and Daughter are great songs, but they're not heavy Sabbath songs by any means. It doesn't have that girth to it. And they have a couple of heavy ones on each one, but it's a different heavy. It's like a progression of the heaviness from the Dio era, but not quite as heavy, I guess, like production wise. It's like trying to be heavy with almost a modern Poser production at that time.
Yeah. When I first heard the song Headless Cross, I still remember my reaction. I liked it, but I thought it sounded like they were going for the Dio sound. And I was cool with that. I love that era, but it didn't seem to be too unique. It didn't seem like it was taking things to the next level. It was sort of going in reverse. But that's fine. If you're going to go in reverse for Sabbath, certainly, back catalog is pretty excellent. It's not bad. If you don't have any ideas moving forward, well then, if you're Black Sabbath, you might as well go backwards, and it'll be pretty cool. So that was my first impression. But the thing about it is, when you're talking about in that era, there's a lot of musicians that were circling around, and we're talking about, and I always make the comparison to Whitesnake, because in Sabbath at the time, Cozy Powell plays drums on Headless Cross. Neil Murray, who was in Whitesnake for a pretty good amount of time, then he would join with Cozy for the following album, Tear. So you had some Whitesnake, you had some musicians that were kind of circling around in that area. And I think it kind of muddied the waters a little bit. You know, Sabbath sort of lost its core identity. Geezer wasn't in the band anymore. It was only Tony. And so things largely to do with the musicians, the other musicians that were involved, kind of pushed it away from that Sabbath sound. And to me, I mean, it didn't matter too much whether or not the personality of the band changed to suit the times. I wasn't really gatekeeping for that as much as I just really wanted to hear the heaviness. Black Sabbath was a heavy metal band, like you said, John. They were the metal band. And when Tony's guitar sound started to get kind of overshadowed by keyboards, and when then the tone itself, or maybe the mix, didn't bring out that rawness, that tone that you can feel in your gut, that the tone that was so much a part of the classic Black Sabbath personality, I just felt like it wasn't really Black Sabbath anymore. But moving forward, and like you said, John, over time, when we like fans were hungry for something Sabbath related, we became more forgiving. It's like, all right, you know what? I'll take Whitesnake Sabbath, you know, as long as it's Sabbath, you know, I'm all right with that. You know what? I've been thinking about it, and it's okay that they sound like Whitesnake. I like Whitesnake a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's Tony Iommi, right? And Tony Martin, well, he kind of sounds like Dio. So yeah. And so I think over time, not when the albums were released, but a few years later, when we started to miss Black Sabbath, there was something that was original, not a reunion, not a retread of something that they were trying to, I mean, even to humanize. I mean, that was kind of like a reunion of sorts. We wanted something that was current, something that was representative of a band in a current state. And really what we had was the Tony Martin era, when Cross Purposes came out. I mean, I went all in on that. I was really excited about that album, and I still like it. In fact, in some ways, I go back and forth, but it's probably my favorite. I go back and forth between that and Eternal Idol. But I mean, I really liked the album at the time. I was ready for it. I was cool with Tony Martin. You know, Geezer was back in the band. It was a great tour, seeing him live, and like we talked about, Tony Martin was great at giving the fans a really good evening of Black Sabbath music. He could do the Ozzy era very well. He did the Dio era really well. He did the material that he was involved with really well. He was a strong singer. So you went and saw Sabbath, regardless of whether or not maybe you weren't that crazy about the studio album, but you knew that when you saw him, you were going to get a really good show, and you did. So that was one of the things I think that kind of redeemed Tony Martin in and around that time.
Well, it's funny because I thought the thing I liked the least on Cross Purposes was Tony Martin's vocals. I think his vocals were better on Eternal Idol, really on all those albums. I mean, honestly, on Headless Cross, his vocals make that album really great. Because if the vocals weren't as strong as they were, I could see where it could get really, it just take away from some of the beef of the album. Because I'm a big, I think Tony Martin is a really underrated vocalist, and I love the I mean, Eternal Idol is my favorite of his for sure, and I know it was originally done by Ray Gillen, which was that version is amazing. I love that. I even think to me that's even better. It's hearing like a, you know, just I mean, getting into Ray Gillen for a second. Those vocals on that, when I heard that, it blew my mind on how sick it was, because it was just a totally different way of listening to a Black Sabbath album for me. And for me, that made it interesting. I remember playing that on tour for the Cannibal Corpse guys. We toured with them, and they were like, what the hell is this? And it had like some live tracks after. It was like a bootleg, and it had Ray Gillen singing those songs. And you know, it's weird, but there's an era of us in the 80s, mostly death metal dudes, I think, I don't know, that really love those like rare vocal performances on some of the Sabbath stuff, just because it gives it a different flavor. But I'm getting kind of off track, but I just think about that. I remember when I first heard it, I was just like, holy fuck, this guy could sing. And it sounded really cool. See, I don't mind those different perspectives in Sabbath, but if I look at it in, what was it, 86 or whenever Eternal Idol came out, 85, I can't remember the year, but if then I wasn't having it, it was like, no, this is not right. But 15 years later, I was like, this is like my new favorite thing to listen to every day, is listening to Ray Gillen sing some of the classic Black Sabbath songs live, but anyway, getting back to Tony Martin, Tony Martin isn't a Ray Gillen. I think Ray Gillen's a better vocalist than Tony Martin, but I think once you get settled into his vocal style, I think it's great. I mean, I just love his tone, and I think it works with Sabbath. And I don't know. I know a lot of people think it's weak compared to, Dio and Ozzy, but to me, it's just different. It's a different take on the stuff. So if you're looking, if you're looking at it especially if you're looking at it as a 70s purist, then okay, it's not, you're not going to like it. But if you're looking at it as, I love Tony Iommi. He's my favorite guitar player. He's singing with this other guy that could really wail. He's, it's something a little different. I'm hearing some of my classic songs played slightly different vocal wise. And for me, it's kind of fun to hear it in that way. I'm not, of course, it's great to hear him, the original way with the original singer. But for me, I like when I hear, I will get into it in another episode, when I hear, say, Dio or Ian Gillan singing some of the old classic Sabbath songs, for me, it's a blast and it's totally fun to hear that. Like, I just get a kick out of it because it's like, I've heard these original versions so many times. So it's so nice to hear these slightly different takes, but not so far away. It's not like they're terrible versions of it, just different, places of setting the tones of the vocals and stuff in there. And to me, the songs are good enough where they lend themselves to, different vocal interpretation. I mean, because anybody trying to mimic Ozzy, especially, it's impossible almost. I mean, he's like super original. And I mean, Dio's, it's a little easier just because he's more of a skilled singer. And I think, definitely Tony Martin has that Dio-ish. It's almost like, I don't know, Dio light, but with his own little added flavor to it or something. We'll say it's like Diet Pepsi with a little bit of vanilla thrown into it.
Yeah. He is, that's a good way to describe him. He is kind of like Dio light. And that was my impression. That was my takeaway when I first heard Headless Cross. I'm like, yeah, this guy kind of sounds like Dio, but kind of like new Coke versus old Coke. Or like,
yeah, some people are stubborn about that.
Yeah. But it was good.
I'm sorry, really quickly, one thing about Tony Martin, though, that I respected a lot from him is that he basically sang whatever came to the table and tried to sing his ass off to do it. And he didn't do what some people complain about Dio, is to make it his own. And that is something in that situation, it's a tough call for people in the band to make, because you don't know, do you want to try to make, say, the Dio song, the Ozzy songs sound closer to the Ozzy version, or do you just say, screw it and let's try to make it something totally different? That's a decision probably Tony Iommi made. And, Tony Martin probably just said, okay, I'll do it how you want me to do it. You want me to just try to, sing along to it. And, he wasn't getting the same sound as Ozzy, but they still sound, if you want to say, they still sound closer to Ozzy, definitely, than say Dio does it, or Ian Gillan or whatnot, or what was it, Glenn Hughes. I mean, those guys didn't sound anything like Ozzy for those old songs, So do you give Tony Martin points for trying to do it, or do you take minus points for him trying to do it?
I think when you hear these songs, when you hear these old songs, even if you're not even aware of it consciously, there's a cadence to the way that the vocals are involved with the music. And when I'm relaxing and I'm listening to Live Evil, and I'm into Neon Nights and Children of the Sea and Voodoo, and I'm all about it. I'm like, yeah, this is great. And then you get into War Pigs, or you get into Black Sabbath, and you start to listen, and your mind is drawn to what you remember the last time you heard it with the original singer. And when something pops up, it hits a different note, or it hits a different intonation, or there's some sort of an inflection. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, what just happened there? And sometimes you like it. Sometimes it's like, okay, well, that was different, but I don't mind it. And you grow to like it. But other times, depending on how much of a commitment you have to the original version, it may rub you the wrong way. With some of the Ozzy, some of the Dio song, some of the Ozzy songs that Dio sang, it didn't work for me. And with Live Evil, it was the drawback of the album, but one of the drawbacks. There's a few of them. I mean, I'd say the album is pretty well balanced between virtue and things that were kind of a failure, but definitely high on the list of things that didn't work for me was the way that Dio sang the Ozzy stuff. And I don't expect him to try to modulate his voice to sing in a higher range like Ozzy, or to try to pretend he's like Ozzy, but there's certain things when a line is phrased that, even though he could have sang it with a natural expression, but just follow the melody line. He was taking the melodies and going in a different way. And some people like that and some people don't. When we did our Live Evil podcast, I mentioned that I had read online where some people said that they liked Dio's version of Paranoid better than Ozzy's, because at the age they were, they heard that first. That was their first version of Paranoid that they heard on Live Evil. And then, they grew to like it. And then they heard Ozzy's version. They're like, oh, I don't like it as much. I like Dio's version. And to me, that made sense. But I'm like, wow, I can't imagine that. Man, that would really be strange. But it all depends on what you hear first, and just a personal taste. But for me, I and this is where Tony Martin succeeds in being the representative singer for Black Sabbath in that era, is that he had all this material, and and a lot of it was very different. I mean, you're talking about singing Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and Children of the Sea in the same set. I mean, they're very different vibes, but he could bring it in an evening, and I thought that was great. As far as him being more assertive in a Dio kind of way, I think he could have been. I think he could have taken more ownership, in a sense where he always seemed like he was intimidated by his role in the band. And at that point, when you consider the legacy of Black Sabbath, it's pretty easy to understand how somebody would be pretty humbled by that. But I felt like, there's a reference I could make to the male prowess, but I'm not going to, because it's a family show. But when you're on stage and you're fronting Black Sabbath, you got him out there, and you are larger than life. And I don't think he quite had that image, and I think that was his only drawback. But everything else, I think he had a great voice. Yes, it diminished a little bit from Eternal Idol to Cross Purposes, but it was still on point. It's still a distinctive, clean voice. He's a great singer. His melodies were great. They were memorable. He brought a lot to material. And I think in a live situation, he was even more successful, because he was saddled with all this material from well, he never did anything with Born Again, which would have been interesting to hear. But I mean, he could handle any of the Ozzy stuff as well as he could handle the Dio stuff. And I think that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna say negative stuff about Tony Martin live, it did come across like he was not in charge. It felt like this is the Tony Iommi show, and I'm here to present these songs to you. And it'd be almost like Tony Iommi's solo band, and I'm here to do the best job I can. It'd be like watching when you watch Yngwie play live, his band's like on the side.
Yeah.
It's all him. I mean, it wasn't that bad with Sabbath, but it's that's like an extreme. It was obvious that Tony Martin didn't go up there and was just like, yes, I am the man. I'm here. You must obey. I am the vocalist. He definitely had. It was just weird because it just came across that way. It wasn't even. I don't even think he could even help it. It was just like he just had a inferiority vibe about him that these other accomplished vocalists that played with Sabbath. But it's almost, how could you not second guess yourself?
Yeah.
You're joining Black Sabbath. Just look at the list behind you of vocalists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, any style of great vocalist you have, obviously, all four or five, whatever vocalists you want to say, major vocalists before him are all kings of the game almost.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's where that's what I think was the situation. It's like you got what's that?
I love Tony Martin. I think he's great. When I listen to his stuff, I want to just go there and be like, and sing it. I have a blast.
Yeah, but I think you got to put yourself in his shoes, and at that time, it's like, wow, to be on stage with the legend that is Tony Iommi. And at one point with Geezer Butler, and you got these two rock icons, metal icons, flanking you. You're in the center stage. That's got to be really, really intimidating. But part of the thing about picking the right person for the job is to not only pick a person that has the vocal chops, but the personality. And that could be a bad thing, as we saw with Dio. That kind of backfired on him. Dio came in, he had the vocal chops, but he also had the presence, the confidence to push Sabbath from where they were on Never Say Die, not commercially successful, pushing them into this new era for the 80s that was really successful. And there probably weren't a lot of guys, like if Tony Martin, like say in the bizarro world, Tony Martin was the guy they chose to be the singer after Ozzy, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have been as successful, because I don't think, based on his personality and the time that he was in Sabbath, I don't think he would have been able to get it across. I think the audience sees, they can sense fear, they can smell fear. And if they smell the fear, they're not going to accept you. But you come out there and you're confident, and you like Dio, you're twirling the mic stand, you're flashing the horns, you're like, whoa, this dude means it. Wow, man, I didn't think
here to party started.
Yeah, this guy, whoa, he won me over. The confidence just was like overwhelming. You got to like take the audience and put them in the palm of your hand, and that's what Dio did. Tony Martin didn't really quite have that same effect, but all things considered, it's an overwhelming situation to be in, but I think he did a really good job in spite of that.
I love those albums, and I think it's great. It's great that they're finally getting a repressing, even if it's not my preferred way, but nothing ever happens the way I want it, so it's okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, there you go. We're I think it's safe to say we're all excited about this eventual Tony Martin albums coming out. I'm assuming they're going to put them out on vinyl also, so that will be nice to be able to get an album like Forbidden and Cross Purposes that were never originally released.
I was going to say, I don't think they were ever on vinyl.
Yeah. I don't think Cross Purposes and Forbidden were. Tear and Headless Cross, and of course Eternal Idol.
They were all released on vinyl. Cross Purposes is probably the most expensive one to get. UK, and there's a UK and there's a German. It's actually a US pressing too. It's about $800. But you got to, you know, there's also some bootlegs that they've released. There's a couple bootleg versions of Cross Purposes that came out
Yeah.
in small quantities, and if you can get on it right away, you could have gotten them for like $30. But then, you know, if you snoozed on it and then you try to find them, then now they're even expensive. So
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I did see Forbidden 2 on vinyl in the record store before. I didn't think about it, but after thinking about it, I do remember somewhere. I mean, this was years ago. I probably around the time it came out, but I haven't seen any of those in the store forever.
yeah, no, they were gone pretty quickly.
But anyway.
All right, so yeah, we're excited about the Martin era reissues. I'm sure when this box set eventually comes out, we'll have to get us all back together, and we can discuss what we think of it. And hopefully, we'll be sitting here talking about all the bonus stuff that we were surprised that they put on there that we didn't even know existed, and all this other fun
One
stuff.
last thing, John, you referenced a couple times about some of the shows in the 90s, and there are some killer bootlegs of Tony Martin. In fact, I mean, consistently night after night, and there's a lot from the Tony Martin era. In my experience, there's more bootlegs, there's more live recordings out there that exist than any other era. And man, he was really consistent, and the band was consistent. I mean, John, I think I gave you a few of them, some of the better ones. It was like Sweden, Germany. There were some shows in the US.
It's like people recorded every single show of any of the tours that he did. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they're all great. Most of the ones I've heard. So I mean, there's a lot of things. If they want to put a nice package together, you know, they can dig into that stuff. I mean,
they need a version of The Shining live. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah,
or something off of you know, Eternal Idol live. You know, a little later on would be great. You know.
Yeah.
Mixed in with them.
All right. Well, we'll be checking back in with you when those come out, and we'll let everybody know. So let us know in the comments down below if you guys are excited about the possibility here. Hopefully it's going to happen here. These official Tony Martin albums to get officially re-released. Let us know in the comments down below what you guys think. And I'd like to thank John and of course Darren here. John, our special guest here on Sabbath Sunday. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing him again here on Sabbath Sunday. And thanks, guys. And until we see everybody out there again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.